and most recently, it's been the effort to destabilize Syria. Everyone knows that Syria, that ISIS is a direct result of the U.S. and the anti-government fighters in Syria. Their weapons came from the United States. They were a faction among the U.S.-trained, U.S.-supplied, U.S. armed forces that were created to overthrow the Syrian government. So if people in the U.S. can come to understand that the foreign policies of their government are linked to terrorism, I think they can come to understand what the leader is saying, and they can get kind of more of an insight into how to stop terrorism, which is something that all sensible human beings want. They want an end to terrorism, whether they be the leaders of Iran or they be the leaders of the United States. We all have a common interest in the end to terrorism around the world.
Not recently, last year I visited a small village in the south of Lebanon, a Christian village. And I spoke with the priest. And, next to the, just neighbors, a neighboring village was a Muslim village. And this village, the Muslim village, was really Hezbollah village. And so I asked the priest, is there any problem? He said, no, no more problem, because there's a fascist party in Lebanon, was a fascist party, which at that years ago controlled the village, and so they created the violence. Since Hezbollah liberated the south, they live in peace. So this is the key question. So there are two Christians and Muslims are living not only as neighbors, but as brothers and are peaceful.
Right.
So this is the same, in principle, the same situation you have here in Europe. In Europe, you have now a situation in France, in London, in wherever in Europe, you have many cultures. Christians, Muslims, Hindu, many others. And as long as those different cultures live together in peace, there are no problem. The problem always comes when there's an invasion from outside. So who are the outsiders? The outsiders are either fascists, who are in those countries, who try to use problems which exist among human beings in order to, portray certain religious tendencies or political tendencies as dangerous, or takfiri. And just take, for example, the terrorists who organized the Paris attack. All of them were born in France or Belgium. So they didn't travel to Paris from, let's say, the Middle East. They were born there. They were citizens, they had their passports. But they were grown up in an atmosphere of hatred, in a ghetto, in a situation of poverty, of isolation, and of course of permanent propaganda, anti-Islam propaganda and Islamophobia. And this is used by those takfiri terrorist organizers to brainwash the people, especially people who are socially broken and mentally broken, in order to turn them into dogs of war.
Yes, thank you,
and
Michael.
This is exactly.
Thank you. You almost answered my next question. I was going to ask, who do you think is making this food of thought for the people of Europe? And you almost answered it.
So, Fatima, what do you think, first of all, about the whole letter that you have seen, not just this one, but also the first one that Ayatollah Khamenei just wrote for the youth?
Well, I think he's... well, I mean, I think the letters are well written. Sometimes there's a translation issue, so I'll read the letter and I'll be like, this could have been maybe a little translated. But this last letter, the most recent one, was, I think, very, very well translated, and I think it was kind of a statement for Iran to let the youth of the West know that they're standing against this, ISIS, and Daesh, whatever you want to call them, and that the youth of the West shouldn't feel so responsible. There are plenty of Muslim powers that are doing their part to try to eradicate them.
True. Okay, so why do you think that Ayatollah Khamenei wrote this letter specifically for the youth of Western countries?
I think it's strategic. We know that Daesh is out targeting our youth, telling them that this is the Islam that they have to be a part of and that this is their obligation as Muslims. And so this is a way to counter that, to let them know that, hey, look, there's another way to be Muslim in the world. You don't have to constantly oppose everybody, and you don't have to be violent, and you don't have to be... You can oppose ideologies without necessarily, killing innocent people or whatever it is that Daesh has done.
Okay. And there are some serious points in this letter about the contradictions of Western policies. Are these contradictions said elsewhere? I mean, any other media or any other person has said such things before in any other place, or this is the first time that some person starts to, express such contradictions?
I think among people who know and who study politics, there's a clear-cut difference between Daesh and really the rest of the Muslim world. But I don't think that there are very many news outlets that go out of their way to make such distinctions. Or, for the news outlets that are maybe a little bit more fair, they assume that whoever is reading their news already knows these things. And I don't think it's explicitly mentioned in very many venues or by very many people or countries or whatever you want to call it. There are very few people that are drawing that line and saying, hey, look, these people are different than we are.
I see. And do you think that showing contradictions by a leader like Ayatollah Khamenei will be effective in changing the minds of people, or it is better to be said by other leaders or other people or any other authority? Will it be effective?
So I'll be candid, right? Yes, I'll be candid, right? Among people who respect Sayyid Ali Khamenei, obviously it's effective, but these aren't target audience, right? Your target audience isn't people who already support Iran, who know Iran's policies, who, who support them ideologically, who know that they've been oppressed in a way by Western powers. Your target audience are people who maybe, they don't know the difference between Iran and Saudi Arabia. They put them in the same bucket. They say these are the same people: Islamic government, theocracy, etc., etc. So I don't know. I mean, if you're talking about non-Muslims and non-Shias, people who aren't really familiar with the divide between Sunni and Shia Islam, I think that maybe there are more effective ways to get the message across, because there are a lot of people in the West who either don't know who Sayyid Ali Khamenei is, or who will write him off because he's the supreme leader of Iran.
I see.
It goes to such an extent that this disinformation is a daily thing in the ruling media. So they portray situations, especially in the Middle East, in Islamic countries, completely wrong. They have nothing to do with reality. It even goes to the extent they try to recruit people from those countries, like so-called refugees, to turn them into traitors and enemies against their own countries.
Right.
For example, I give you two examples. Just give you two examples. I could talk hours about that story because it's very painful.
Yeah, exactly.
You have, I call them so-called Iranians. For me, they are no Iranians. They end up here in Germany. They get automatically asylum. Automatically, with money, everything. Even they are better off than some poor German people who are jobless. And these so-called Iranians, I call them so-called Iranians, they talk about a lot of terrible things about their own homeland or their former homeland, which have nothing to do with the truth. but immediately they go into the media. And so for the ordinary people in Germany, they think, of course, these people are from there, they tell terrible stories, of course, this country is terrible.
Right.
The same is for some Syrians who are ending up here now. Some of them, I discovered already 3 who were fighting with Takfiri groups and killing civilians in Syria. They're now so-called refugees in Germany, telling a lot of terrible stories about Syria that have nothing to do with real life. Even they make propaganda for the continuation of the genocidal war against the legitimate government, against the people of Syria. So we have a very complex story.